Liberty Counsel urges the Supreme Court to review the Oklahoma Personhood case. Hi, I'm Matt Staver, founder and chairman of Liberty Counsel. Joining me is Matt Barber, vice president of Liberty Counsel Action. Matt, this case is a case coming out of Oklahoma involving personhood, defining person as any human being from the beginning of the biological development of that human being until natural death. And there was a group, Personhood USA, that Liberty Counsel partners with, moving forward to get this on the ballot, but the Oklahoma Supreme Court short-circuited the process. Instead of ruling on the procedural issues, whether it complies with the procedures to get on the ballot, the court ultimately went to the very issue of whether or not this is constitutional under Roe v. Wade and other Supreme Court cases decided on the issue of abortion.
Which is surprising that they would even go there when you consider that when the court ruled on Roe v. Wade, it was kind of left open. At the point in time, they said, well, the science today, it's not real clear when life begins, so we're going to err on the side of a right to privacy, and they kind of made up this new idea that was nowhere to be found in the Constitution. And so women were given a carte blanche right to kill their unborn child. Well, the Supreme Court, that's open for debate. Science is now unequivocal on the fact that life begins, human life begins. Even pro-abortion doctors will acknowledge that, and scientists, that life begins at the moment of conception. So they really preempted the Supreme Court here and short-circuited the democratic process.
They did in several ways because, first of all, most courts, although not all courts, and there's a split between both the federal and state courts in this issue, review these constitutional amendments, these citizens' initiatives, for procedural compliance. Is it a single subject? Is it clear? Is the description of it not confusing? And then if and when it gets enough signatures to be on the ballot, and then if it actually passes during the ballot initiative and is actually placed as part of the Constitution, at some point thereafter you could challenge it as to whether or not it's in compliance with federal law. That allows the political process to go forward. And in fact, in Oklahoma, the people of Oklahoma have reserved this inherent right to be able to have this initiative to amend their own constitution. So it's a right that they have not delegated to any government entity. They have that as an inherent right of their political process and power to be able to amend their own constitution. But when the Oklahoma Supreme Court steps in prematurely, doesn't even allow the process to move forward, and then reviews this on the basis of not procedure but substance, whether or not it conflicts with Roe v. Wade and the Supreme Court abortion decisions, it literally short-circuits the process. And that's one of the issues, the main issue that we are asking the Supreme Court to review. Obviously, there will come a time when the Supreme Court will need to review whether or not this does conflict with the abortion decisions. And we believe, of course, at that point in time, the Supreme Court would need to reverse Roe v. Wade. But at this point, it should just simply be the process, not the substance.
And it's telling the level to which groups like the ACLU, the Center for Reproductive Rights, and the National Organization for Women, all of these radical leftist pro-abort organizations, the hoops that they will jump through to try to keep this from getting on a ballot, to try to keep this from passing. They don't want this going through the court system because it does, in fact, it would fundamentally undermine Roe v. Wade and the illogic inherent within Roe v. Wade. That's our point. That's why they are fighting so vociferously to keep this from actually going to we the people, which is how the democratic process is supposed to play out.
And every time this comes up, abortion, whether it's a citizens initiative like Personhood USA or parental consent or even some kind of informed consent where you're going to be informed of the process, you have the ACLU, you have Planned Parenthood, you have the other pro-abortion organizations filing suit to block these efforts. The reason is they just simply don't want any information getting to women. They don't want consent. They don't want to protect children. They have a death culture. And in this particular case, they filed suit to stop this from being on the ballot. And unfortunately, the Oklahoma Supreme Court jumped the gun. This does comply with all of the procedural requirements to get it on the ballot. They should have allowed this to move forward, should have allowed the citizens of Oklahoma to vote. And then when this is on the ballot, then you could challenge it at some point in time. But if you allow the court to ultimately short-circuit the process here by interpreting what they think the Supreme Court decision says, then put this in any other context. The court could do that in any other situation, and you would never allow these citizens' initiatives to get on the ballot because you've got a majority of the state Supreme Court that just simply ideologically doesn't like the issue because they're going to perhaps have a decision of their court overturned by a citizen's initiative, like in California, for example, where the Supreme Court in California decided the issue of same-sex marriage. The people in the state of California went to the ballot box. They amended the Constitution to overturn that decision. If you allowed that state Supreme Court to then make a ruling on the substance rather than the procedure, they're not going to allow the people to overturn their decision. So that's why this really undercuts the power of the people that's inherent in their reserved rights.
And that's why this is a textbook example of what you'll hear a lot of strict constructionist constitutionalists say is judicial activism. The court has really abused its authority, exceeded its authority here, has not exercised or respected the constitutional limitations that are placed on the Oklahoma Supreme Court. They have not exercised judicial restraint, and they have gone beyond the authority that the Constitution grants to them. So let me ask you this, Matt. We've petitioned the U.S. Supreme Court to take a look at this. What does that mean? Where does it go from here?
Well, where it goes from here is that there needs to be a response from the other side, and then we have an opportunity to file a reply. And then in September, they have what they call a super conference, where they do this conference before the actual opening of the Supreme Court, looking at petitions that have been filed. If it's not reviewed then, it'll be reviewed early in October, and we'll determine at that time whether the Supreme Court takes the case. If they do, then we'll argue it in 2013, most likely. But what we have right now is this situation, Personhood USA, is moving about in many different states, Oklahoma being one of them. And the provision in Oklahoma was going to define person as, quote, any human being from the beginning of the biological development of that human being to natural death. Now, that in and of itself does not ban abortion. There would need to be legislation that comes after that that would ban abortion. Because of the constitutional issue, you would base it upon that. So this is the groundwork that ultimately will set up a clash with Roe versus Wade at some point in time. And in fact, that issue needs to be decided by the Supreme Court. We need to return this country and the Supreme Court back to a culture of life where they understand and respect not only the culture of life, but the rule of law.
That's right. And people need to understand the personhood movement is simply about codifying, if you will, putting in state constitutions around the country, the reality, the self-evident truth that life begins at the moment of conception, both based in science and all reality, political reality, to reaffirm that, to affirm that really for the first time. And if the natural consequence of that is that it derails the ridiculous logic of Roe v. Wade and outlaws abortion, protecting the personhood of these little tiny people, then so be it.
Well, this is a case that Liberty Counsel is certainly working on as one of the issues to advance the sanctity of human life. Liberty Counsel has partnered with Personhood USA all over the country because we believe that it's important to move forward. Even though none of these petitions have yet been passed on a state ballot, the fact of the matter is that William Wilberforce worked for many years to overturn slavery. It wasn't something that happened overnight. And the more and more this moves forward, the more and more people are ultimately moving in the right direction to ultimately reserve and protect the culture of life.
Well, amen. And if the ACLU and Planned Parenthood are a little nervous now, they need to be nervous because we're just warming up.
That's right.
The personhood movement is just warming up. Yeah.
Well, give us a call at Liberty Counsel, 1-800-671-1776. If you want to be involved in any of these issues of the sanctity of human life, freedom of conscience, freedom of religion, defining and affirming the definition of family as the marriage, the union of one man and one wife, one woman. Give us a call at Liberty Counsel. Sign up for our Liberty Alert. You can also go to the Grassroots Action email. Both of those you can sign up for on the front page of lc.org. And we also have now 3 books in the series of the Patriot's Handbook. One of them, the most recent one, is the one on political action of pastors in churches. We also have a DVD called Silence is Not an Option. I encourage you to ask for the handbook series, and particularly the one on political action of pastors and churches, and the DVD, Silence is Not an Option. Make sure you get that to your pastor and church leaders. It is time for not only pastors and members in the church to speak up, but for all of us to make a difference in our country today. You can do that by praying for this country, praying for Liberty Counsel, and supporting us financially and getting information to stay informed and get motivated.